You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
You are very welcome. I am Ahonu, and Aingeal Rose is with me today to talk about fear and parasites. Now, as you know, we always talk about these things as they come up because we're noticing a growing rise of fear around the world, and it comes into us in various ways. We see it in the media, of course, but we also find it coming from a lot of our subscribers around the world where they're asking about the future, what's going to happen, what's going on. And we sense that fear needs to be addressed. Now, also on the other side of that, on the positive side of things, of course, we hear the acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. So we're recognizing also that while we've spoken in recent weeks about how invincible we are as beings, people are really believing this false evidence and accepting it as real. So we're going to tackle that today, and we're also going to look at something that has come up for us also over the last short while, and that is the whole issue of parasites. And of necessity, I had to go into the likes of Wikipedia and find out what a parasite was in terms of its definition. And it's an organism that lives in or on another organism as its host and benefits by deriving nutrients at the host's expense. And in a derogatory way, it's also a person who habitually relies on or exploits others and gives nothing in return. And we've also heard people describe that cancer, in fact, being a parasite, that it lives on the other healthy cells around it and consumes them. So this is something that's affecting the physical body. It's affecting our spiritual body. It's affecting our world in all kinds of different ways. But one of the things that we have been trying to come to terms with in terms of trying to put this in perspective is that we ourselves as humans, Aingeal Rose, aren't we parasites on the earth itself? Don't we live off our host?
Well, I don't know if I want to tackle that part of it yet.
I knew we'd get stuck into the deep.
To begin, Ahonu, I mean, I hope somebody doesn't switch off the radio right now. Let's back up a little bit to talk about how this whole subject of parasites came up for us. And it was during a chakra class that you and I are facilitating, in which it's being dictated by source, this particular chakra class. So it isn't like any other chakra class that you find out there. Our intention when we began to teach it was that we were going to go through the chakra system with particular meditations and take people all the way on up through the chakras. But when we went into the records and talked to Source about it, it turns out that week by week, it is guiding us into particular journeys and meditations that are not in the normal chakra order for specific reasons. So this particular night, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, wasn't it, Ahonu? We were doing the meditation, and during the meditation, I heard Source say to me, be willing to release all the parasitic influences in your body. And when I heard that, I also saw, it was almost like small photographs of millions of people in my cells, memories. Anytime anybody had a thought about me, anytime I had a thought about somebody else, it was all appearing in the cells as if the cells were film that had recorded all these projections and images. So Source was asking me to wipe the slate clean, if you will, be willing to release all those. It actually called them parasitic influences.
Yeah, because the way you described it at the time was that each of these photographs, as it were, they were images of other people, was like they were sucking on your energy. They were living off your energy. And the same may well be true of everybody.
Right, that was exactly the point.
Yes.
Okay, and it reminds me, too, of one time in Ireland. Remember, Ahonu, when we were doing an Akashic Record group and Babaji came in at the very beginning and said,
yes,
would you like me to remove the reptilian cords out of your backs? Remember, Ahonu?
Yes.
And it was quite a shock to us all. And we each got a chance to choose if we wanted that help or not.
Everybody did.
Everybody did. And interestingly, people's energy came back, backaches disappeared. Mm-hmm. So I'm just setting the stage for this conversation with people today, that when I heard that in the chakra class about parasitic influences, and then I saw the image of it, I thought, oh my gosh, who even ever thinks about that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the chakra class is very interesting, and one day we will offer it to people because it's quite profound, actually. But I found myself, when Source asked me to be willing to release all the parasitic influences, I found that I was willing to do that, but I had a little bit of fear around it too. I had a thought of, well, what if I wipe my memory slate clean out of my cells of all these people? Then what? Then what will I be? And I think this was an interesting reaction for me to have.
And are you wiping your children? Are you wiping your mother, your father? Are you wiping your family influences out of the cells too? These are valid questions.
Right. But, I mean, I know Source well enough to know that it wouldn't be suggesting anything if it wasn't for our benefit. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I did the exercise. But didn't we find a couple nights later on YouTube, suddenly there appeared this video that was talking about the consciousness of the world today, and it actually used the word the parasitic consciousness. Yes. And so this is why we're having this conversation today, because we want to talk about this, because that video seemed to be an extension of the information that Source was giving us. And what it was it was going back in history, and it kind of talked about the fall of the planet briefly. It went in to say that a planet hit our planet, and there was destruction, and there was the flood because of it, and that the beings who were here, who were originally very aware of their connection to Source, suddenly experienced fear. Okay, so it kind of just ping-ponged off of that beginning, and to say that was the beginning of fear in mankind. And so then it went on to say that the powers that be, basically the male-dominated society that we're in all over the world, and what we're seeing now and have been seeing throughout history, is this domination and control paradigm that feeds off of the fear of humanity. So not only does it feed off the fear of humanity, it actually does things to promote more fear, because the beings that have that agenda are really parasites. Okay.
We sustain them.
We sustain them, and that they don't really have any life force energy of their own.
Yes.
They need us to constantly be in fear in order to keep re-energizing their agenda. Okay, so when we look at the world today and what's happened, even in the past year, really, the degree of violence we're seeing, the degree of terrorism, all these events, mass shootings, ISIS, everything, climate change, earthquakes, everything is happening, which is promoting more fear in people, Okay, so not to say that people don't show up when there's a disaster and help each other.
Yes.
And they come together in those ways.
Mm-hmm. But just let me interject really quickly, because do you remember, Aingeal Rose, not too long ago, we did a podcast about how the likes of Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general actually is fostering and engendering this fear in all the movies, not all, but in a lot of the movies that they're actually bringing out. Because it's funny, we did go to the movies because it's a great form of entertainment in lots of ways when you're looking at something that's wholesome and fulfilling. But the trailers that they were showing for the upcoming season, my God, I have to say, they were shocking in the level of violence. They were shocking in the level of debauchery. They were shocking and I'm not, I'm not a prude by any means. But I really want to get across how this is what we create, that outcome for a negative agenda. We create it by going into fear around it, or by being entertained by the possibility of killing something else and murder, seeing something else suffering.
Well, this is the thing. You're right, because, we went to see the new Pirates of the Caribbean because we like Johnny Depp.
You like Johnny Depp.
And I just had to go see it. But you are right. It was a half an hour of previews for other movies. And you're right, the degree of ugliness, darkness, grossness.
End of world stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, really? And the fact that people are attracted to that and like to go see those sorts of things is still a shock to me, really. I mean, and I don't mean things always have to be nice. A good drama's great, but you don't have to have repeated, loud, bang, destruction stuff going on all the time. But anyway, getting back to the topic, in talking about it on a consciousness level, because this is really where it has to be addressed, that the majority of the human race has a lot of fear in their consciousness. And more, the more we watch events go on, and terrorism and beheadings and all this, attacks in airports and schools, everywhere, right? It's getting more and more common. It increases our fear, and it's been shown scientifically that when we're in fear, we emit or we radiate from ourselves a particular type of electromagnetic field, which becomes a whole collective consciousness thing that only empowers these parasitic influences. Okay, and I'm going to call a parasitic influence any sort of control system, whether it's a government or religion or parents or anything like that, that tries to have dominion over people and mold how a person should think, how they should behave, what's truth and what's not truth. All of that I'm calling a parasitic reality, because, and as long as a person's true natural self is suppressed, put under, put down, kept down, you eventually, and fear becomes the dominant thing, and your true nature gets shoved underground. Whenever that happens, you can know. That's why people don't feel connected. And we know ourselves, because I do readings all the time. People want to know, or we teach classes. People want to know, how do I connect? How do I reconnect to my spiritual self? How do I listen to my teachers? I mean, how do I get connected? They are aware that they're not connected. They don't know what the problem is. And the truth is that now their consciousness, their true self, is buried underneath belief systems of fear. And also, we call it the authority problem. Okay, under authoritarian control paradigms, teachings, whatever they may be, right? Where someone feels that they have to follow another person who appears to know more than they do. Somebody just wrote me this morning. I had listened to one of our podcasts, and And she said to me, if you're so connected to Source, why do you need those cards? She was speaking about tarot cards. That must have been a podcast where I mentioned tarot cards for some reason. I don't know why. But then it went on to say, I heard that those were negative, and I heard that they opened portals to, and I heard, right? Without any real experience of her own, somebody somewhere told her those tarot cards were bad. And so it's just an example. I did respond to her, and I don't believe they're bad. But the point is how many people just heard, somebody told them, and so therefore they believe it, and now it's a belief system of theirs without any real personal experience of it themselves.
But isn't that true of history in general, though, Aingeal Rose? Because, for example, I know this to be true. When I was growing up in Ireland, we were learning world history, whereas I know that in America, there's very little world history taught. It's the American version of history. Now, I don't want that to sound derogatory in any way, but it's an example of how belief systems are built up in a young embryonic population, a child's mind, that this is the truth. And it's not, far from it. In fact, an interesting thing is coming up now, even as we speak politically, when people talk about Turkey. I know that the general impression in the United States about Turkey is that, it's not a good country because it's connected to Syria or whatever. It's trying to do this in Syria and so on. But the fact is, if one was to be taught history, we would realize that during the time of the potato famine in Ireland, for example, a tribe of Native American Indians and the country of Turkey were the only two nations in the entire world that helped out the starving Irish people. Now, what does that say? And then...
But is the regime the same today in Turkey?
No, I'm not.
I think we have to give a little bit of leeway for that.
I want to give another example, though, too, because Turkey, for example, has another credit to its side, that when, at the time of the Second World War, for example, Turkey was just an emerging, fledgling nation, actually, and they helped save more Jews than any other country in Europe at the time. Now, think about that, and very few people know that. And these are points that I'm raising only because we get fed a lot of stuff that we believe. Just like that lady who called you and said, I was told this about tarot cards. A lot of times we do tend to believe what comes to us from authority figures. And that's what we're saying. We're saying question everything. Question everything. Question everything from your own place, from your own deep place, because you are your own best authority, actually. Yeah? And let us just draw to a close with this for the moment, temporarily. Yeah, we want to take a quick little studio break, and Aingeal Rose has a lot more to say about this authority problem when we come back, and we will be right back after this.
This episode is sponsored by Twin Flame Hosting. Twin Flame Hosting has been designing and hosting websites since 1993 and is now a leading provider of internet-based web services to large and small businesses all over the world. We also care for many individuals who depend on our quality, reliability, and affordable hosting solutions because we know what professional business people need in a hosting solution. Visit twinflamehosting.com.
All right, we're back, Ahonu. Okay, and so we were talking about consciousness and the parasitic mind control, really, that's going on, and how we help propagate it by becoming fearful. Okay, so on the level of consciousness, though, somebody could say, well, this is all well and good, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu, but how do we get out of that? And I think it has to go back again to consciousness and inner world and outer world, where we have to realize that the outer world is a reflection of our inner world. So a lot of people might know that I wrote a home study course called Transformational Writing. And what it is a course where it's just guiding you into beginning to question and examine your own thoughts and beliefs, because The truth is the inner is the outer. And we have to, each one of us, if you want to really break down this parasitic paradigm, we have to start taking responsibility for the fact that we help create it by the quality of our thoughts and beliefs. Okay. And people just don't ever examine those. It's too easy to just project outside ourselves and say, well, this one's doing that, so they're guilty, and we just need to get rid of them, and the problem will be solved. The problem is in the consciousness, the collective consciousness, and it's not going to change and reverse itself until we start looking at the events outside of ourselves and saying, how is that a reflection of something that I might believe? Okay, because we have to take a look at that and say, well, gee, I really do believe that. It reminds me back in the day when I was studying the Course quite actively, and something happened in my relationship at the time.
You mean the Course in Miracles?
The Course in Miracles. And I remember saying to Jesus at the time, there's no way that I created that. Okay, and Jesus said to me, oh, really? Well, let me just rewind your mind a little bit and show you this videotape of there you were doing the dishes and you were thinking about these things, and then they manifested. And I thought, oh my God. Well, Jesus continued to do that with me for 6 months and showed me that everything I was personally experiencing in my life, I had thought about at some point. Okay, so the solution can only be done in our consciousness, because that's what gets outpictured in the physical world. It's not the other way around. It's inner gets reflected outer. Okay, so everything out there is really a symbol, a symbolic representation of the content of our thoughts and our beliefs. So if we want to stop emitting electromagnetic frequencies that are fear, so that these parasitic influences can stay in power over us, we have to take a look at that. We have to admit that we have fear. We have to look at what are we afraid of? What do we think is going to happen? And then we've got to decide to change our minds about it, because the consciousness is really unlimited in what it can do. I mean, as soon as we have a thought, there is a plasma field that starts to congeal and mold that thought into a shape. And it's unlimited. It basically just says yes to whatever you think and decide is true. It'll say, okay, I'll make more of that. All right. And it doesn't care what it is. It doesn't have the ability to discern what it is. So I just think that, we have to remember that we are unlimited in our ability to change our minds and change what we believe. So this is the reason why we're having this conversation today, because it was talking to us about the degree of mind control going on through fear. All right, so we're going to have to leave it here now, aren't we, Ahonu, because we have an appointment.
Unfortunately, we do have to leave
But we will continue this conversation
Absolutely.
at another time.
Pick up on the point you made about deciding to change our minds about it. That's where we'll pick up next time round. So there's our call.
Thank you very much for listening.
We look forward to speaking to you again soon. Blessings from myself, Ahonu, and from Aingeal Rose.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose and Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.